It's an only in America story we've seen happen only a few dozen times in our nearly 250 years. In one moment, the President of the United States is the world's most powerful leader. Then in a single day, he returns home. It's in those moments, relaxed, candid, without the pressures of public life, when the character is often the easiest to see. Tonight we'll return to a story about the 39th President of the United States, but this time as Jimmy Carter, Sunday school teacher. My special guest is a man who sat in his class and wrote to tell about it. Stay with us. My very special guest tonight has made something of a life study about the power of loving your neighbor, living out his faith by listening, serving, and caring for the person next to or in front of him. He's an author, songwriter, documentary filmmaker, and collaborating with chart-topping artists like Amy Grant, Andrew Peterson, Audrey Assad, and funny people I know you like Mark Lowry and Patsy Claremont. There are a dozen reasons we wanted to have an 8-time Dove Awarded nominated artist like Andrew Greer on the show, but it's his new book about Jimmy Carter's extraordinary, ordinary life as the week-to-week teacher of the Sunday school class at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia. That's the reason he's on the show tonight. Before you meet Andrew, though, let's watch this.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hello. That's better, okay.
Hi, I'm Andrew Greer. I'm an author and documentary filmmaker and the editor of the new book, More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter.
Jesus said, love your neighbors, but also love who else? Your enemies, yeah, and people that are not lovable and people that don't love you back. So we're supposed to love each other.
I was first drawn into this little town of Plains through two of my biggest heroes, President Jimmy Carter and former First Lady Rosalind Carter. And of course, Plains was their lifelong hometown. Now, I first got here, like a lot of people, as a tourist to visit Jimmy Carter's famous Sunday school class. And then I came in town for work as a filmmaker, involved in a documentary that was set in Plains and also involved the Carters. I immediately fell in love with the people, and I fell in love with the place, and I moved here. I am now a citizen of Plains, Georgia. I also am a member of Maranatha Baptist Church. That's a church I'm sitting in now where President Carter taught Sunday school for over 40 years after he came home from the White House. So I was up here at church one day, kind of rummaging through the libraries, and I found this box of cassette tapes that were some of President Carter's lessons, and I thought, I wonder if anyone's ever been able to read President Carter's Sunday school lessons in a book format. And I got an idea.
If we're in trouble or sorrowful or had a big loss in our life or failure, we can go to God and confess, and God will forgive us through the life of Jesus Christ. I think that's a wonderful gift that God has given us.
These lessons that he taught from the scriptures that he loved informed and inspired the life he lived, and it can encourage and inspire your life and my life and the way we live out our faith every day.
Be kind to one another and forgive each other as God through Christ was kind to us and forgives us. You see, these are just practical examples of how we should act toward other people.
We may no longer have the teacher here in our midst, but we do have his words in the pages of this book. So come learn with me from the faith of one of my favorite Sunday school teachers as we pour through the chapters of this new book, More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter.
Andrew, let me first begin by saying that you are such a joy-filled guy. Our producer, Jeff Coleman, said he met you at Plains Baptist Church because you offered to get him a cup of coffee. And there are a lot of heavy things going on in the world. But so what is it that gives you that kind of joy that you have?
Well, I mean, I can't fully explain it, I guess. But I think I grew up in a household with two parents who truly loved people. My dad was a therapist, my mom a classical organist and a music educator, but I saw the way that they saw people. I saw the way that they treated people, and I think, when you see other people as equal to yourself or on a level playing field, or you're not always looking for something from someone, but instead just want to listen and to hear and to enjoy them and to learn about them. I actually think that's one foundation for a peaceful life. Of course, I think that comes from my parents' faith. I think that faith was instilled in me and has developed and grown on my own and trying to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And I think, following in those footsteps always paves a path of peace and joy. So I, I don't know. I'm sure there are days where people have not perceived me as joy filled as well. So, I am a human being, but I do think that deep abiding peace is from the example of Jesus.
Well, you've moved to Plains, Georgia from Nashville. I mean, and in your line of work, I mean, you're this, really outstanding performer, award-nominated performer multiple times.
That's right.
And
Yes.
And so, but you moved to Plains, which is kind of off the beaten path. I mean, I'm sure it's a lovely place, but it's a little bit off the beaten path. So tell me what you were thinking, I mean, and how it's impacted has it helped your career at all, or do you feel like you're where God wants you to be right now, or tell us.
Yeah. I think small towns is where people who are always nominated go. No, I think I won the jackpot. I mean, this is the prize. I got into town, of course, like many people, Joe, through President and Mrs. Carter, who are heroes of mine, going to the Sunday school class that we'll talk about here in a little bit in the new book. But I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the people. I ended up filming a documentary here that was involved President and Mrs. Carter, involved the people of Plains, was set here entirely in Plains, but was about race relationships in everyday community. And so that really helped me dig in and kind of test the waters. In small towns like Plains, many of the townsfolk, they have generations of family who have lived here. So you don't just come in overnight and suddenly it's not that they don't love you and that they don't accept you, but it takes time to become a part of the fabric of it. And I think being in and out of town, filming that documentary off and on for years, kind of set the table and helped us recognize a chemistry that was already there. I tell people a lot, I lived in Nashville my whole adult life since college till a couple years ago. It's not that I was looking for someplace outside of Nashville. It's just that there was this compartment in my heart, and it was called Plains.
Yeah. So when did you first go to the Sunday school?
That was years ago, Joe. I graduated college about 20 years ago, maybe a little less than that. And I wrangled up some willing fools to go to this little town of 600 people to go to a Sunday school class. Of course, a former president. I just had no idea. I was born in the Reagan era and really got to know the Carters' legacy as humanitarians, their work in the world, really in my college years in the early to mid 2000s, started reading his books, Googled Jimmy Carter and found out you could go to his hometown and you could literally sit in an A-frame church structure like the ones I grew up around that could fit maybe 200 people, 250 people, and be in the company of a former world leader and listen to them glean insights from scripture. It checked all my boxes. I love history, I love presidential history, and I love the Bible. And so I came into town probably in 2006 or 7 for the first time. And that began a love affair that eventually moved me here a couple years ago.
Wow. And what was this teaching like? I mean, we got a little snippet, a little taste of it imagine having the President of the United States standing in front of you, not reading from a prepared manuscript and just teaching Sunday school. Tell me what that was like. What was he like as a person? I mean, was he easily approachable?
Oh, for sure. You'll hear that from people who, of course, grew up with him, but then people who came into town throughout the years. I didn't come into town until later in their lives, but throughout the history of their lives. And of course, after they came home from the White House in 1981, now known across the world as former leaders of the free world, in Plains, they were just common citizens. In fact, I asked him that question. I said, how do you place yourself in this kind of cast of characters, in Plains? And he said, well, I hope just as a common citizen, sure, they may ask me my opinion about some things, like they'll ask Ellen, or they'll ask, Preston, or they'll ask Ched, or they'll ask Bose, or, just like any other neighbor, but as a common citizen. And I think it was that citizenship here in Plains, in a small town of 500, 600 people, that really was the buoy. It was the catalyst.
Did he live in a big estate? I mean, do you have a big house? Or?
No, I mean, the house is right down the street from my little cottage, and it's, they owned one house in their lifetime, built one house, owned one house, a ranch style brick home from the 1960s. And I mean, that shows you the fabric of a person to some degree. It's okay to have big houses. He would say that too. What you can afford is fine, but it shows where their priorities were, and their priorities were in other people, not just in their possessions.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound in his teaching like he was at all partisan either. I mean, he talked about that one little snip that we saw in the clip. He said, we're supposed to love our neighbors ourselves, and who else are we supposed to love? And the audience is kind of quiet, and he says, we're supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to love people who don't love us, and people who aren't so nice and so likable.
Yeah, and people who run against us, like it's not a us versus them. I think his lessons were confrontational and compassionate. They were continually asking us to confront our own biases, prejudices against other people, which we all have. We all have to confront those within ourselves. But then to turn that into the example of Jesus, where we treat others with compassion and we receive compassion from others. I was just talking, Joe, to Jason Carter, his oldest grandson, yesterday up at the Carter Center. They had a fabulous event for his birthday with the Postal Service and the stamp that the Postal Service has just issued in his memory. It's beautiful. But Jason, in his speech about his grandfather for that ceremony, and then afterwards we were talking about these Sunday school lessons. Jason wrote the afterword to the book. And so we were talking about how his Sunday school lessons was constantly infringing on the us versus them mentality, and we have a really strong us versus them mentality right now in the United States. And I know in other parts of the world, it's something we'll always have to combat. These lessons, hopefully contained in this book, but also just through the legacy of his teaching, will help us confront that in our own lives.
Yeah. Did you follow any of his Habitat for Humanity work? I mean, I remember seeing on the news, you see Jimmy Carter in some town somewhere and helping to build a house, he's with a
for
hammer.
40 years. I mean, I think the last one, Joe, was in 2019 before the pandemic shut that down, and they also began to decline in their health. But he was there. He had just fallen and had bruises on his eyes and stitches, and he was doing what he could at 95 or 96 years old, actually in Nashville. So yeah, I was able to be on a build, the first one back after the pandemic, which, though they were still alive, they weren't present at that time. And Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood have taken it, not taken it over, but continue to oversee the Jimmy Carter Work Project so that it continues to have the impact it's had for decades.
What do you hope for people to get from your book about President Carter? I mean, obviously, he was very, very different from many other presidents. I don't know of any other president that taught Sunday school. After he had been president of the United States. But what do you want them to cull from it? Because your readers are going to be Democrats and Republicans. They're people who live in this polarized time in which we live. And what do you want them to get? There may be some people that say, well, he's a Democrat, so I don't want to hear anything he has to say. But you're not coming at it from the standpoint of his politics. You're coming at it from the standpoint of his faith as a Christian person and what he did after he left the White House.
Well, that's the beauty of these lessons. That's the beauty of Jesus, is that it's neither Democratic or Republican, or Democrat or Republican. But I think President Carter, these lessons provided him that space, as did his humanitarian work, that politics no longer had the red tape of parties. You had the freedom to follow your heart and to exercise that in the world. But I want people to know and to take away, these are his words. So I listened through hundreds of his lessons and found about 15 that I felt like would really translate on the page, on the written page well, because he delivered these, of course, orally in a Sunday school class. And so we left in, the editors at Mercer University Press and I left in his folksy language. If he said, "I've got to," and said, "I have to," we wanted you to be in the room. Plus, he asked a lot of questions of the audience and expected a response back. And so in italics, you also get the responses of the audience. It's inviting people, whether they got to come to Sunday school with President Carter or never had that opportunity, it's inviting them into that space and into that room. I wrote introductions to each of the decades. There are Sunday school lessons from the 70s all the way through 2019. And I wrote some introductions to the decades to help give some Carter context. This is what the Carters were doing in the world. This is how their faith was expressing itself in the public square while he was teaching these lessons. But these are his words. These are his insights. These are his thoughts, really as untampered as they can get. So dive in, and really experience. It truly is like experiencing, a Sunday with Jimmy Carter. And so I'm still fascinated that in our modern era, that we would have someone who had dedicated his life to public service, that was informed, his life of public service was informed by his belief that the teachings of Jesus were just the best way to love and live. Or were a great example of how to love and to live.
It's a tremendous example to the rest of us because, it takes a lot to become president of the United States, not least of which would be ambition. So somebody has to be incredibly ambitious and to think that they could be the leader of the free world, means they've got to certainly have a lot of guts and confidence in themselves. As well as the capacity to get other people to follow them, and to get behind them. He did all that. He went from being a peanut farmer to a state senator to a governor to a governor, but not very well known nationally governor, to becoming the Democratic nominee for president and then president of the United States. And he got to be the leader of the free world and to hear his pronouncements, trumpeted around the world. And then he comes back home to Plains, Georgia, and how does he translate all that? He translates that into teaching Sunday school, and doing Habitat for Humanity.
Well, and really a lot of credit and kudos goes to Maranatha Baptist Church, his home church, for being willing to open the doors and to infrastructure that for years. You have people coming and spending the night in parking lots, and you have George and Jan and Kim and Bose and Betty and all these people helping to infrastructure, and Dan Ariel, who was the pastor for years when President Carter was teaching. You have all these people willing to invite people from all different countries, different states, different ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds, all kinds of religions. Not everyone who walked through those doors were Christians. There were rabbis who would come in. There were people, Muslims, and people of different religions who, because of the history of it, wanted to hear it. That's a really incredible opportunity for a small town, and they seized the opportunity alongside President Carter. So the people of Maranatha, I dedicated the book to them because they're the ones who made it possible, and I think President Carter would fully agree with that. But it's just kind of beyond belief, to be honest. I think in regards to what you were saying, all that confidence that it requires to ascend to the presidency of the United States, I think you see an evolution to some degree in President Carter, which if all of us remain alive and learning, we will evolve in our thoughts and our minds and our hearts and our beliefs, even to some degree, will evolve. And you see that in his lessons. The 1970s, he's teaching as president of the United States, right? And then the 1980s as a freshly unelected a leader. And then as he gets into the Carter Center work and as he ages, you see all of that come out in his lessons. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to show that we never stop learning. And I don't know that Joe will ever stop. I believe we're eternal people. So the crescendo is never ending. So, hang on.
Well, my guest tonight is so talented, Andrew Greer. If he's behind the piano singing one of the great hymns of faith, or at the microphone across from CeCe Winans, or making us laugh with Mark Lowry or Patsy Claremont, he's one of the most uplifting and joyful people you'll meet in life. We'll take a quick break and be right back with Andrew Greer.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
Well, my guest tonight is Andrew Greer, and we're talking about More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. Andrew, you've experienced some wonderful successes in life. What keeps you grounded? How do you keep from being intoxicated by success or attention? Because you get a lot of it. We're going to be watching you soon on get your award.
Finally winning one of those doves, letting that bird land. Well, gosh, I mean, what grounds any of us, I think, is community. I really do. And a lot of my draw to Plains, what we've been talking about, was to be among who I think I am. My parents and I often called it, I grew up in a small town, even though my parents had fairly metropolitan professions. But I remember them one time saying, we just like to live around real people. And that's what we hope we are too. People who experience life on the ground, and are not so puffed up that they lose touch with the reality of a neighbor who's hurting, or someone who's recently lost somebody, or neighbor friends who are aging, and that's a challenging experience for them, or whatever it is I'm experiencing in my life, and receiving community as well. So I think community is the great grounder. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exhibited not only in the life of the person of my faith, but I think that's exhibited in the Carter's life.
Yeah.
How did they stay grounded?
Did you ever sing for the Carters? You ever sing for President Carter?
Yes, I did a couple times, or a few times, and he loved piano playing, and that's the only time he ever got onto me, which I think he got onto people in his own fun way a lot, but it was because I was supposed to be playing, and I was not, because I was trying to talk to him. Anyway, he was like, I think you're supposed to be playing now. But I did get to sing a song that I wrote that was just a song. It's called Jesus, My Friend, and it's about just asking Jesus to draw near in our pain. And they were, again, in the end of their lives, but he was already in a wheelchair, and she was sitting on the pew right by the piano. And someone showed me a picture later. I didn't see this because I was just focused on the song, but he had his arm around her, and they were holding hands, and they were essentially in a posture of prayer during the song. And again, the picture of the most people who've ascended to the most powerful place in the world to still exercise a humility of, I am but one, I am not the master of this ship, I think a posture of humility is an incredible example in our life today. And I'm thrilled that one of my songs, at least at one point or at one time in their life, could be a part of that expression, of their lives.
Looked like they really loved each other too. I mean, obviously I was watching from afar, but looked like they genuinely loved each other, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, nothing fake about it. Yeah.
Well, you can't fake those things, and it's so visible. And then you see the result of his life, with regards to all of his family members. I mean, not just his neighbors as well as his blood, his family members, his grandson. I mean, the involvement of his kids and his grandkids and nieces and nephews in his work and in his legacy says so much about him and about the kind of person that he was.
Well, and no one stays, as my dad, who's a therapist and marriage and family counselor, no one stays married 77 years because they have to.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere they've found the grit to want to be married to each other and to continue to grow in that. You don't have to in America stay married if you don't want to.
Yeah. Well, what a blessing. Well, we're just so grateful for you, brother. Andrew Greer's new book, a walk through some of President Jimmy Carter's Sunday school lessons. It's called More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. It's available wherever good books are sold. I'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, I think what's wonderful about Andrew is that Andrew is somebody who's
curious about people. He genuinely notices people around him. So to be a good storyteller and to tell a different side of a story about President Carter, you have to be willing to sit and wait, and I think you have to be in Plains to do it. Maranatha is such it's a small, as he describes, A-frame church, and there's not a lot of storage or...
How many does it seat? I mean,
I think they said the maximum was a little over 200, maybe 250. On a Sunday when President Carter was there, it was first come, first serve to get into that sanctuary. But what he captured in this book, I love the fact that the text goes from President Carter's verbatim, like you're reading a transcript of a trial, and then you're hearing the audience responses, because he would do this call out and say, "Where's everybody from?" And you would see the diversity and how hard it was for people to get there. Plains is not an easy place, accessible place to get to. It's kind of easy to get there, but it's not accessible, it's not handy. So people who came, I know many of them had deep questions about what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does it mean, that contrast in power, knowing somebody is very powerful, but is talking about submitting to the authority of someone else, to Jesus, and what Jesus promises. And then to see the president do that through a period of suffering, through his cancer treatments. That, I think, was the living Sunday school lesson. You have the words, and then you have the person, and both of them fit pretty nicely.
Yeah, boy, it just what an extraordinary life, to have been president of the United States and to have lost.
Yeah.
It's one thing to, if you serve your 2 terms and, you won twice and now you're home.
Yeah.
But he lost badly to President Reagan and came back home to Plains, Georgia. And as I understand, his peanut farm, the peanut business wasn't doing so great either when he got back to...
Yeah, he had to rebuild the peanut business and then launch these other enterprises, build the presidential library, not as a tribute to himself, but as a place for the study of peace and human rights, bringing people together. But a lot to learn from every life, but a special, I think, education when somebody has gone through the fires of national leadership. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, brother. Well, maybe you can't sing like Andrew Greer. I know I can't. Maybe you'll never be president. Maybe no one outside of your family, friends, and co-workers will ever hear your name. But God does. He knows you. He knows the number of hairs on your head, if you still have hair. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you're never alone in the world. Andrew and Jimmy Carter's life is a reminder God can use anyone who simply says, "Yes, send me." If you enjoyed today's conversation, please let me know. There's a comment box on the website, joewatkins.org. I'd love to hear from you. From America's First Capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. For Jeff Coleman and the entire team behind the cameras, thanks so much for watching. God willing, we'll see you again next week. So when you went down to see him, he was already in a wheelchair.
Yes, he was not there that Sunday. So the Secret Service had set it up. It looked like Mrs. Carter was going to run that Sunday. Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.